Australia has accused Iran of exporting terror onto its soil, blaming Tehran for arson attacks on Jewish sites in Sydney and Melbourne. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese calls it foreign-directed aggression, expelling Iran's ambassador and branding the Revolutionary Guard a terror group in Australia's most dramatic diplomatic rupture since World War II. Tehran denies the charge, dismissing it as payback for Australia's recognition of a Palestinian state, a move already condemned by Netanyahu, who accuses Albanese of fueling anti-Semitism. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has accused Iran of directing at least 2 anti-Jewish attacks in his country and announced plans to expel Iran's ambassador in Canberra and designate Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps a terrorist organisation. Speaking to reporters in the Australian capital on August 26th, Albanese described the attacks, which took place in Sydney and Melbourne last year, as extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation to undermine social cohesion in Australia.
Since the terrible events of October 7, 2023, we have witnessed a number of appalling anti-Semitic attacks against Australia's Jewish community. I've made it clear that these sorts of incidents have no place in Australia and that I wanted ASIO and the AFP to investigate as a priority. ASIO has now gathered enough credible intelligence to reach a deeply disturbing conclusion that the Iranian government directed at least 2 of these attacks. Iran has sought to disguise its involvement, but ASIO assesses it was behind the attacks on the Lewis Continental Kitchen in Sydney on October 20 last year and the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne on December 6 last year. ASIO assesses it is likely Iran directed further attacks as well. These were extraordinary and dangerous acts of aggression orchestrated by a foreign nation on Australian soil. They were attempts to undermine social cohesion and sow discord in our community. It is totally unacceptable, and the Australian government is taking strong and decisive action in response. A short time ago, we informed the Iranian ambassador to Australia that he would be expelled. We have suspended operations at our embassy in Tehran, and all our diplomats are now safe in a third country. I can also announce the government will legislate to list Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, as a terrorist organisation.
The attacks Albanese talked of took place at the Lewis Continental Kitchen in Sydney on October 10, 2024, and at the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne on December 6, 2024, according to Australian officials. There were no casualties in either of the attacks, but in both incidents, assailants set fire to the properties, causing extensive damage. However, neither ACO Director General Mike Burgess nor Albanese explained what evidence there was of Iranian involvement. Burgess said no Iranian diplomats in Australia were involved. Burgess said, "This was directed by the IRGC through a series of overseas cutout facilitators to coordinators that found their way to tasking Australians." Penny Wong, the Australian Foreign Minister, said Iran's ambassador Ahmad Sadeghi and 3 of his colleagues have been declared persona non grata and given 7 days to leave the country. She said the move marked the first time that Australia has expelled an ambassador since World War II and that the country has also withdrawn its envoy to Tehran. Still, the Albanese government will maintain some diplomatic lines with Iran to advance Canberra's interests, Wong said, advising Australians in the Middle Eastern country to return home. She also warned Australians considering travelling to Iran to refrain from doing so. However, Iran denied Australia's allegations through its foreign ministry spokesman Esmail Baghai, who tried to link it to the challenges Australia faced with Israel after announcing it would recognise a Palestinian state.
It looks like that the action, which is against Iran, diplomacy, and the relations between the two nations, is a compensation for the criticism that the Australians had against the Zionist regime.
Notably, the move against Iran came a week after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu branded Albanese a weak politician who had betrayed Israel by recognizing a Palestinian state. Netanyahu's extraordinary public rebuke on social media came after an August 11th announcement by Albanese that his government's recognition of a Palestinian state will be formalized at the United Nations General Assembly in September. Later, on August 24th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu penned a scathing letter to Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, in which the Israeli Premier claimed that the latter's decision to recognise a Palestinian state had added fuel to an already large fire of anti-Semitism spreading across the country.
I am concerned with the alarming rise of anti-Semitism in Australia and the lack of decisive action by your government to confront it. Throughout the past year, anti-Semitism has scarred Australian cities. Since your public statement signaling recognition of a Palestinian state, it has intensified. Prime Minister, anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve, and to do so by a clear date, the Jewish New Year, September 23rd, 2025. History will not forgive hesitation. It will honor action.
There has been a reportedly steep rise in anti-Semitic incidents in Sydney and Melbourne since the Israel-Hamas war began in 2023. Australian authorities have previously said they suspect that foreign actors are paying local criminals for hire to carry out attacks in the country. Police have already arrested at least one suspect in the Sydney Cafe fire investigation and 2 suspects directly accused of torching the Melbourne synagogue. The 2 attacks in Australia that Iran is alleged to have directed targeted Jewish-owned places, but did not result in any deaths. The first incident occurred in October 2024 at Lewis's Continental Kitchen, a kosher restaurant in Bondi Beach, Sydney. It was set on fire in an arson attack. The restaurant had been serving the local Jewish community for over 50 years. The second attack took place on December 6, 2024 at the Adass Israel Synagogue in Melbourne. 2 masked individuals were recorded throwing a flammable liquid inside before igniting a fire. While these incidents caused significant damage, there were no fatalities or injuries reported in either attack. Authorities have charged suspects in connection with the synagogue incident, and investigations indicate that the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, orchestrated these assaults through intermediaries in Australia. No specific details have been reported about any individuals, Jewish or otherwise, being killed in these attacks.